So a circle has a center. I know this seems a little elementary, but bear with me for a moment. A circle has a center. And then from an equal distance from that center, so all of these dashed lines are the same length. From that equal distance from that center, we create a circle. It's kind of a sad excuse for a circle, so I'm going to try and make it a little bit better. There we go. And those equal distances from that center is called the radius. So the radius length in a circle is constant. It's not going to change. So wherever I put that radius, it's the same length throughout the entire circle. Now, important to note that the center of the circle on a coordinate plane we call h, k. So we just use h and k to denote the coordinates of the center of the circle. And then r we use for the length of the radius. And the equation of a circle, the algebraic equation of the graph of a circle, is x minus h, quantity squared, that is a minus, x minus h. So if h is positive, you'll have x minus that number. If h is a negative value, you'll have x plus that number squared. And then k is y minus k quantity squared. And then we have r, the length of our radius. We're going to take that and we're going to square it. And this has everything to do with a squared plus b squared equals c squared. It's a pretty cool thing. Okay, so we've got x minus h quantity squared plus y minus k quantity squared equals r squared. We are ready to write the equation of a circle whose center is at -2, 1, and radius is 3. So I highlighted h with a yellow highlighter. So I'm going to highlight -2 because that is my h value. I'm going to highlight that +1 as my k value. And my radius length is 3. We'll highlight that, keeping the highlighted colors the same. H, k. Just writing it down. Now if you write this formula down a couple times, you'll remember it. X minus h quantity squared plus y minus k quantity squared equals r squared. We've got x minus -2, so that would be x plus 2 quantity squared, plus y minus 1 quantity squared equals 3 squared. So the equation of our circle is x plus 2 squared plus y minus 1 squared equals 9. So how does it get any more challenging than that? Well, we're going to pull in that distance and midpoint idea. We're going to have two endpoints on a circle that go through the center. That's called the diameter. So here's the center of our circle, and I'm going to use purple to connect two endpoints on the circle that go through the center. That is called a diameter. And you can see that a diameter is made up of two radius lengths. So two radius lengths. So we've got r, r. So the diameter is equal to 2r. The radius is equal to half the diameter. Another thing is that the center is the midpoint between two endpoints of a diameter. So in this first couple of examples that I gave here, the diameters were two radiuses. It's equal to the length of two radiuses. The radius is equal to half the diameter. That right there is talking about the distance formula. So we would use the distance formula if we were talking about coordinates on a plane and determining distance. But here, the midpoint between two endpoints, that we would use the midpoint formula. So both come in very handy when you're talking about circles. Here we have points -1, 6 and 3, -2. Those are the endpoints of a diameter. Write the equation of a circle. So remember, to write the equation of a circle, we need the center. We also need the radius length. So we're going to use both the distance formula and the midpoint formula. Hopefully you can guess we're going to use the midpoint formula to find the center because it's halfway between the two endpoints. It's an endpoint, and this is an endpoint. So the center will be halfway between, so we're going to use the midpoint formula for that, and then the radius length, we can use the distance formula. So let's make that pretty blue. We'll use distance for that one. So let's get started. Let's start with the center. So the center is going to be located halfway between -1, 6 and 3, -2. So h comma k is equal to the average of the x values, comma, the average of the y values. So -1 plus 3 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 6 plus -2 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So our h comma k is at 1, 2. And our radius length, the length of the radius length, is going to be the distance formula. So it's going to be the square root of, now it's going to be the distance between the center, which is 1, 2, and any point on the circle. So I'm going to choose -1, 6, just because that caught my eye first. So between those 2 points. So the distance from 1 to -1 is 2. And we can do this, let's do this a little bit more formally since the numbers might not always be this perfect. X minus x, 1 minus -1 squared, plus y minus y. We know that's going to end up being a 4, right? The distance from 2 to 6 is 4. But watch, the way we wrote it, it looks like it's -4. So I'm just going to demonstrate for you what's going to happen there. When I take -4 and square it, I'm still going to get positive 16. So that only works when we're using the distance formula where the order doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter if we're going from left to right or right to left, because distance will always end up being positive for our distance formula. So when we start talking about physics and things like that, and calculus, we start talking about directed distance. But we're not there yet. We're just right here talking about the distance formula. So we've got the square root of 20. And I'm going to keep it the square root of 20. That's my radius length. So I'm just going to call that r because we know that r stands for the radius length. So 2 things that we have here. Remember, we've got our r value. I colored that in blue, so I'm going to keep that blue just to keep things consistent in your notes. And then my k value was green and my h value was 1. I just went backwards there. Now we're going to write x minus h quantity squared plus y minus k quantity squared equals r squared. And again, I'm going to highlight that for you. I want to make sure you've got this on one. It really only takes one example. If you go through this thoroughly, we don't need to do, 3, 4, 5 examples of this. Really one example good in your notes, and you should feel comfortable being able to utilize those notes when you're doing your practice. So we're going to plug in that 1, the 2, and then I've got the square root of 20. I'm not going to take anything for granted in my brain. I'm going to write it down. The square root of 20 squared is 20. I may end up getting the hang of this, feel very comfortable with doing some of that arithmetic in my head, but for this video, I'm not going to risk it. And there's our answer. So we used our midpoint formula or distance formula to find the equation of a circle given two endpoints of the diameter. So you'll be asked to kind of expand your thinking. Think about when you're going to use the midpoint formula, when you're going to use the distance formula, what the diameter means, the radius means, where the center is with respect to the diameter, and you'll get it. You've got it. So rewatch this video if you need to, take great notes, and you're well on your way.